When I heard my own granddaughter crying at my funeral, I froze. My hands trembled as I gripped the old wooden door from outside the church. The sound of her sobs echoed through the walls, and each cry stabbed my heart like a knife. How could this be happening? I was alive, breathing, standing right there. Yet, inside my family, my blood was mourning me as if I were gone forever. I pressed my ear closer to the door. The priest's voice was low and steady, speaking about the kind and gentle soul of Margaret Hill. My name, my life, my story. She was a mother who gave everything, he said, and may she finally rest in peace. My knees weakened. I had spent months fighting for my life in a hospital bed, far away, believing my family would be waiting for me to return. But now I realized they had already buried me in their hearts. The rain poured heavily outside, soaking through my thin shawl, but I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to burst through those doors and tell them I was alive. But fear held me back. What if they didn't want me back? What if this was intentional? The thought sent shivers down my spine. I had to know. It all started 8 months earlier when I suffered a severe stroke while living alone in my small house on Maple Street. I woke up in the hospital surrounded by beeping machines and strangers in white coats. My body was weak, my memory foggy, and I could barely speak. The doctors said my recovery would take time. My son David had come only once. He stood by my bed staring at me like I was a burden. "Mom," he said coldly, "I don't know how long I can keep paying for this care. You should have written a will." Those words cut deep, but I told myself he was just stressed, that he loved me deep down. After all, I had raised him alone after his father died. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals so he could eat, and gave him everything I had. Surely he wouldn't abandon me now, right? Weeks passed and no one came. I waited every day for a familiar face. Then one morning a nurse came in holding a paper. "Mrs. Hill," she said gently, "your son signed you into long-term care. He said he'll handle everything from here." Long-term care? My heart dropped. That meant a nursing home. But before I could protest, they moved me to a facility 2 towns away. It was quiet, cold, and filled with forgotten souls. Most of us had no one visiting anymore. Months crawled by in silence. My hands regained strength, my voice returned, and I slowly remembered everything. I asked about my family, about my son and my granddaughter Lily, but the nurses said no one had called or visited since my transfer. Then one day during breakfast, I overheard 2 staff members whispering near the hallway. "Did you hear about Mrs. Hill?" one said. "Her son told the city record she passed away last month." "What? But she's still alive." The other replied. "Yeah, I know. But the papers say otherwise. Must be a mistake, right?" A mistake? No. My gut screamed it wasn't. My son had officially declared me dead. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about why David would do such a thing. Then I remembered something chilling: my house, my savings, my late husband's pension. If I was dead, he could take everything. I asked the nurse for a phone, but she said I didn't have any listed emergency contacts anymore. It was like my entire existence had been erased. Days turned into weeks and I became invisible. No calls, no letters, no visits. Until one morning, I overheard that the local church was holding a memorial for Margaret Hill. My name again. My funeral. I felt a rush of anger and heartbreak. That was my chance to prove I was alive, to expose David's lie. I waited until Sunday. I borrowed an old coat from another resident and slipped out quietly while the morning staff was busy. The cold air bit through my bones, but adrenaline carried me forward. I hitched a ride with a kind truck driver who recognized my last name. "Heading to the Hill Family Memorial?" he asked kindly. I nodded slowly, forcing a weak smile. "Yes, I suppose I am." When I arrived at the church, I could see people gathered outside, holding flowers and umbrellas. Familiar faces. Neighbors, old friends, even my granddaughter Lily, now grown up and beautiful, holding a framed picture of me. My throat tightened. She looked so much like her mother, my daughter-in-law, who had passed away years ago. I wanted to run to her to hold her tight. But as I stepped closer, something stopped me. I heard my son's voice through the door. He was giving a speech. "My mother was difficult," he said, pretending to choke back tears. "But I forgive her. She's in a better place now." Better place? My blood boiled. That liar. He wasn't mourning me, he was performing. My hand tightened on the door handle and I whispered to myself, "You wanted me dead, David? Well, guess what?" I pushed open the door. The entire room turned silent. Every head turned toward me. The priest froze mid-sentence. My granddaughter gasped, her hands trembling as the framed photo slipped and shattered on the floor. "Grandma?" she whispered. David's face turned pale, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't breathe. "Surprise," I said softly. "Didn't expect to see me again, did you?" For a long moment no one spoke. Just the sound of the rain tapping on the windows and the echo of my own heartbeat. Then slowly whispers filled the room. "She's alive," someone gasped. "But how?" David took a step back, stammering. "You're supposed to be dead." I interrupted, my voice shaking with both rage and sorrow. "Yes, I heard." The silence turned heavy. My granddaughter ran to me and hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. But David, he just stood there, staring at me like I was a ghost risen from his sins. Then suddenly his wife, my daughter-in-law Claire, stepped forward. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she clutched David's arm. "Margaret," she said quietly, "we can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped. "That you buried me alive." Claire's lips trembled as she tried to find her words, but nothing came out. David's face turned red, then pale again, as if the weight of every lie he'd told was finally crashing down on him. Everyone in the church was staring, neighbors, friends, even the priest, waiting for an answer. The air felt thick enough to choke on. "I asked you a question," I said, my voice echoing through the room. "Why did you tell everyone I was dead?" David took a step toward me, lowering his voice, pretending to be calm. "Mom, you don't understand. The hospital made a mistake. They said you..." "Stop lying," I cut in sharply. "I was alive, David. I woke up. I asked for you. I begged the nurses to call you. And you know what they said? They told me my son had already signed my transfer papers and disappeared." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw David's mask crack for the first time. He looked around desperately, searching for sympathy, but found none. Claire tugged on his arm, whispering something, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. My voice softened, trembling as I said, "Do you have any idea what it's like to wake up and realize your own child has written you off? That your life, your memories, your everything meant nothing?" Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Lily clung to me, shaking. "Grandma, I don't understand," she said through sobs. "Dad told me you died peacefully in your sleep." My heart broke again. Peacefully? There was nothing peaceful about what happened to me. I looked at her gently. "No, my darling. I didn't die. I was sent away. Forgotten. Hidden." The priest cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should..." "No, Father," I interrupted. "Let them all hear it. Let everyone hear how my own son buried me in paperwork while I was still breathing." David's composure snapped. He slammed his hand on the pew. "You don't know what you're talking about. You were sick, confused. You didn't even recognize me when I visited." "That's because I had a stroke," I cried. "But I remember everything now." He froze. And that's when I saw it, guilt in his eyes. The kind of guilt that burns like acid when the truth starts to surface. I turned to Claire. "Tell them," I said quietly. "Tell them what really happened." Claire looked down at the floor, her hands shaking. "Margaret, please, I didn't want this. It was David's idea. He said the medical bills were too high, and if we declared you deceased, we could settle your estate and save the house." A collective gasp filled the room. I felt dizzy, my knees threatening to give out. So it was true. He hadn't just abandoned me. He had erased me for money. David shouted. "She's lying. Claire, stop it." But Claire broke down completely. "No, David. You told me the hospital would never check. You said she wouldn't survive another month. And we needed the money for Lily's college." Lily covered her mouth, horrified. "Dad, you did this?" David's face twisted with panic. "I did it for us. You think we could afford everything otherwise? Mom was already gone in spirit. I just made it official." The church erupted in whispers, some people standing up, others shaking their heads in disgust. The priest stepped back, clearly uncomfortable with the chaos unfolding. I stood frozen, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. So I was just a burden? I whispered. After everything I gave you? David didn't answer. He looked away, jaw clenched. And then something inside me broke, not from anger but from deep, hollow pain. You took my home, I said. You took my name. You even took the right to be remembered. I could feel every eye in the room on me, but I didn't care. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet, forgiving mother. I was the woman who refused to stay buried. Lily turned to her father, her voice trembling. How could you do this? She's your mother. David tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Claire sobbed quietly beside him, guilt written all over her face. I didn't think she'd come back. David finally blurted out. I didn't think she'd survive. The words hung in the air like poison. He realized what he'd said too late. The crowd gasped again. Some people started leaving, unable to bear the scene. I felt my body shaking uncontrollably. So that's it, I said softly. You were waiting for me to die so you could cash in? David's silence was my answer. Then, to everyone's shock, Lily ran to him and slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed through the church. You disgust me, she cried. I never want to see you again. David stumbled back, his eyes wide in disbelief. Lily, please. But she ran out of the church sobbing. I wanted to go after her, but my legs felt weak. My heart felt heavier than it ever had before. The priest approached me gently. Mrs. Hill, perhaps we should step outside. You need rest. But before I could respond, I noticed something. A tall man standing in the back corner of the church watching us quietly. He wasn't part of the crowd. His dark coat and serious expression stood out. When our eyes met, he nodded slightly, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Then he walked toward me. Mrs. Hill, he said softly, showing me a badge. Detective Raymond Carter. I've been looking for you for weeks. I blinked, startled. Looking for me? Yes, he said. The hospital filed a missing person report after discovering the false death certificate. We've been investigating your case. Your son and daughter-in-law are under suspicion for financial fraud. The entire church fell silent again. David's face turned white. This is insane. I didn't. The detective raised a hand. Mr. Hill, please. You'll have a chance to explain down at the station. Claire started sobbing hysterically as two officers entered the room. David shouted and tried to run, but they grabbed him by the arms. As they led him away, he glared at me. You ruined everything, he hissed. I looked him in the eyes and said quietly, No, David. You ruined yourself. The officers escorted him and Claire out of the church. I stood there, trembling not from fear but from the weight of everything I had lost, and everything I had survived. The priest placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You are a miracle, Mrs. Hill, he said softly. You've risen from the dead, in more ways than one. But little did I know my nightmare wasn't over. Because that night when I returned to the nursing home with Lily, I discovered something inside my old bag that changed everything, and made me realize someone else had been behind this all along. When we returned to the nursing home, the rain had stopped, but the silence outside felt heavier than the storm itself. Lily walked beside me, holding my hand tightly, as if she was afraid I'd vanish again. The streetlights flickered, and each step we took echoed through the wet pavement. She hadn't spoken much since the church. I could tell she was trying to process the truth that had shattered her world. Once we reached my room, she helped me sit down and made tea, her hands shaking slightly. I was exhausted, emotionally and physically drained, but something inside me refused to rest. My heart wouldn't stop pounding. As I reached for my old leather bag, the same one I had when I was taken to the hospital months ago, I noticed something strange. The zipper was half open, even though I always kept it tightly closed. I frowned and slowly opened it. Inside, under a pile of folded hospital papers, there was a sealed white envelope with no name on it. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a photograph, an old one, of me standing in front of my house. But on the back, written in neat handwriting, were 4 words that made my blood run cold. You were never meant to live. The room started spinning. My breath caught in my throat. Lily, I whispered, handing her the photo. She looked at it, her eyes widening. Who would send this? I don't know, I said, my voice shaking. But someone knew exactly what David was planning. Maybe even helped him. Lily frowned. Do you think it was Claire? I shook my head slowly. No. Claire's weak but not cruel. There's something else. Someone who wanted me gone completely. Before I could think further, there was a soft knock at the door. Lily opened it, and to my shock, Detective Carter was standing there. Mrs. Hill, he said politely. I know it's late, but we found something at your old house. May I come in? I nodded, my heart racing. He sat across from me, placing a folder on the table. We've been going through your son's records. The financial fraud was obvious. Forged documents, false signatures, death certificate. But there's more. He opened the folder and slid a paper toward me. It was a property transfer document. My house had been sold 3 months ago. The buyer's name was printed clearly at the bottom. Evelyn Parker. I froze. That name. I hadn't heard it in decades. Mrs. Hill? The detective asked softly. Do you know this woman? My voice cracked. Yes. Evelyn Parker was my sister. Lily's eyes widened. You never told me you had a sister. I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. The fights, the jealousy, the years of silence. Evelyn and I hadn't spoken in almost 30 years. We'd fought over our parents' inheritance. She always believed I'd taken more than I deserved. She hated me, I whispered. She said I stole her future. But I never thought she'd come back for revenge. Detective Carter leaned forward. We believe Evelyn helped your son file the paperwork. Her signature appears as a witness on the death certificate. The room went cold. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. So it was her, I murmured. All this time she was still angry. Lily clenched her fists. We have to find her. Carter nodded. We're trying. But she disappeared 2 weeks ago. Her house is empty. No forwarding address, no trace. I stared at the photograph in my hand again. The words, "You were never meant to live," suddenly made terrifying sense. Evelyn didn't just want revenge. She wanted to erase me completely, just like she believed I erased her. That night I barely slept. Every creak in the hallway made me flinch. I felt eyes on me even when I was alone. By morning I had made up my mind. I wouldn't hide anymore. I needed answers. Lily, I said the next day, we're going back to my old house. Grandma, the police said. I know what they said. But that house holds the truth. Reluctantly, she agreed to drive me. The drive felt endless. When we arrived, I barely recognized it. The once warm little home with the red door now looked cold and lifeless. Windows boarded. The garden I had loved overgrown with weeds. As we stepped inside, dust floated through the air. My cane clicked softly on the floorboards. Everything smelled of mildew and loss. Be careful, Grandma, Lily whispered, holding her phone's flashlight. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls like they could speak. In the living room, my husband's old chair was still there, except the cushion had been torn open. Inside, tucked deep within the stuffing, was a small tin box. My fingers shook as I pried it open. Inside were documents, hospital files, insurance papers, and an old handwritten letter signed EP. I began to read aloud. Margaret deserves what's coming. David knows what to do. Once it's done, we both get what's ours. My heart stopped. She planned it with him, Lily gasped. So Aunt Evelyn paid Dad? I nodded slowly. She must have promised him money, or maybe she convinced him he deserved it. Before we could say more, the front door creaked open. Both of us froze. Detective Carter? I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. Just footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the hall. Lily gripped my arm. Grandma. Then from the darkness a woman's voice whispered. Still snooping where you don't belong, aren't you, Margaret? My blood ran cold. I turned slowly, and there she was. Evelyn. Her hair was gray now, her face older, but her eyes burned with the same bitterness I remembered from decades ago. I should have known you wouldn't stay buried, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You never could just die quietly. Evelyn, I whispered. Why? Why go this far? She stepped closer, her shoes crunching on the debris. You took everything from me. Our parents' money, the house, the life I should have had. You got to be the good sister, the mother, the saint. And me? I was the shadow you left behind. I never took anything from you, I said, tears blurring my vision. You walked away. No, she hissed. You pushed me away. So I pushed back. Lily stepped in front of me protectively. You're sick, she said. You tried to kill her. Evelyn tilted her head, almost amused. Kill? Oh, sweetheart, I didn't have to lift a finger. David did everything for me. And then she smiled wider. But maybe it's time I finish what he couldn't. She reached into her coat pocket, and my heart stopped when I saw the glint of something metallic. The air froze around us. The metallic glint in her hand caught the faint beam from Lily's phone. It was a knife, old and rusted, but sharp enough to slice through fear itself. My breath hitched, and every sound in the house vanished except for the pounding of my own heart. Evelyn, I whispered, forcing my voice to stay steady. You don't have to do this. It's over. The police already know everything. She smiled faintly, her eyes glimmering with something dark. Not madness but satisfaction. The police, she murmured, stepping closer. You think they can undo 40 years of hate? They can't, Margaret. You took my life once. I'm just returning the favor. Lily stepped forward, trembling but brave. Stay away from her. Evelyn's eyes darted to my granddaughter. So this is your precious Lily. She looks like you did at her age, soft, naive, stupid. Don't you dare talk to her like that. I snapped, my voice suddenly stronger. Something fierce woke inside me. The same fire that had carried me through every storm, every heartbreak, every lonely night. Why, Margaret? She spat, the knife trembling slightly in her hand. Why did you always win? You always had the love, the sympathy, the money. Even when I was right, people pitied you. I was supposed to inherit the house, not you. You knew that. I stared at her, my chest aching. No, Evelyn. I begged you to stay. You chose to walk away after Father died. You were so full of anger. You couldn't see that I would have shared everything. Her lip twitched. Lies. You never shared anything. You're wrong, I said, taking a slow step forward. You think I lived happily after you left? I missed you every single day. I waited for letters that never came. I prayed you'd forgive me, even when I didn't understand what I'd done. But you didn't want peace, you wanted revenge. For a flicker of a second, something broke in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or pain, but it vanished as quickly as it came. I want what I deserved, she whispered. I want your life. Suddenly she lunged. Lily screamed. I barely had time to react. The blade flashed toward me, but before it reached, Lily grabbed a vase from the table and smashed it across Evelyn's arm. The knife clattered to the floor with a sharp clang. Run, Grandma! Lily cried. But I didn't run. Not this time. I kicked the knife away and faced my sister head-on. Evelyn fell to her knees, clutching her wrist. For the first time I saw not anger, but emptiness in her eyes. You could have had love, I said quietly, tears spilling down my cheeks. You could have had family, but you chose hatred. She looked up at me, her breathing ragged. You ruined me. No, Evelyn, I whispered, kneeling beside her. You ruined yourself. Just then, flashing blue lights filled the window. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Detective Carter burst through the doorway with 2 officers behind him, guns drawn. Mrs. Hill, step back, he shouted. They rushed in, restraining Evelyn before she could move. She didn't fight. She just stared at me. Not with anger anymore, but something hauntingly sad. As they pulled her up, she whispered, You always win, Margaret, even in death. Her words echoed through the house long after she was gone. Lily threw her arms around me, sobbing. It's over, Grandma. It's finally over. But as I held her, I realized something painful. Nothing could undo what had been done. My son was gone, my sister was gone, and the home I once knew was just a shell of ghosts. Detective Carter approached gently. Mrs. Hill, we found enough evidence in her possession to link her to multiple forged documents, even your hospital files. She's going to prison for a long time. I nodded slowly, unable to find words. My eyes wandered across the ruined house, my memories, my laughter, my life, all trapped in dust and decay. Lily squeezed my hand. You can stay with me now, she said softly. No more pain. No more loneliness. Her words melted something in me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a forgotten ghost. I felt alive, truly alive. Weeks passed. The story made headlines across the local news. Elderly woman found alive after being declared dead, family arrested in fraud and conspiracy case. I hated the attention, but maybe in some way it helped others see the truth that sometimes the people closest to you can be the ones who bury you deepest. I moved in with Lily, and every morning she brought me tea in bed, just like I used to do for her when she was little. We laughed again. We cried. Slowly, the world began to feel warm again. But one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found an envelope slipped under the door. My heart skipped. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single photograph, the same one of me standing outside my house, but this time new words were written on the back. You may have survived, but I'm still your shadow. I froze. There was no signature, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Evelyn's. My fingers went cold. She was in prison, yes, but she wasn't done. Her hatred had survived too. I looked out the window. The night was quiet, peaceful. But somewhere in that peace I could almost feel her, the ghost of my sister's envy still watching. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "You can't haunt me anymore, Evelyn. I've already lived through death once." Then I tore the photograph in half and let the pieces fall into the fire. As they burned, I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared of the dark. Because I had learned something powerful. Sometimes, survival isn't about escaping death. It's about walking through it and coming back stronger than ever. And I had done just that.